What is up, everybody, and welcome to FLW Videos. In today's episode, I thought we would start off the year of 2020 with a bang. Or a budget. Yeah, a budget. That fits the episode perfectly. We're going to be talking about the top 10 budget Pokemon of 2020 in Pokemon Go. I did create a list for this in the past, but we've actually seen a major set of updates. Number 1, Pokemon simply have access to new moves. Number 2, we've actually seen an update to some of those specific moves. And then finally, we simply just have new Pokemon added into the game that we have not seen before. So with all of these updates happening in the game, I want to keep everyone up to date. And at the end of the day, the idea behind these budget Pokemon are to try to catch them weather boosted in the wild so that you can just immediately use them. Maybe you have to TM to get over to that ideal moveset, but regardless, you can go ahead and use these Pokemon on a budget. They perform very well, so I'm very excited to get into this. I consider myself a budget player after all. But anyways, if you do enjoy this episode, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. Let's jump into this list. By the way, they're not going to necessarily be in order of importance, but they are meant to stack upon each other, especially when we start talking about dual type Pokemon. This is going to be the best way for us to cover as many typings as possible. So let's start it out in the number 10 position. We've got Machamp. So Machamp is going to be a solid Pokemon, and as you can see, its stats are pretty solid related to the attack stat as well as the stamina, and it has an overall ranking of 86th in Pokemon Go. And as far as the moveset is concerned, you want to have Counter and Dynamic Punch. So recently, Machamp was dethroned by Lucario. Lucario gaining access to Aura Sphere propelled it to the number 1 fighting type position. At the same time though, it's very difficult to obtain that, and you also have to get it locked from the eggs, which means you're going to have to spend a ton of resources, a ton of Stardust to be able to power up your Lucario to then compete with Machamp, while Machamp's family can be found in the wild up to level 35. And people have had this Pokemon for so long, it's going to be very difficult to kind of dethrone it from like a value perspective. From Keldor, we're going to have to see if it ends up being super rare. I think Machamp is still going to be the number 1 budget fighting type option. If it ends up being available in the wild, then yes, Conkeldurr could propel above Machamp. But for now, Machamp is going to be the best Pokemon that you want to have from the fighting budget type. Dragonite. So Dragonite is such a solid Pokemon, and especially related to, honestly, all of the stats. Check this out. We've got an overall ranking of 18th in Pokemon Go. And the more I thought about it, we haven't really talked about Dragon-type Pokemon and having a budget for that. There's so many excellent legendary Dragon Pokemon, but then once you get outside of that, what the heck are you going to use? I would say Salamence could be kind of like a second option, but it's best with the Community Day exclusive move of Outrage, yet Dragonite already has Dragon Tail and has Outrage available to its typical moveset, meaning that it is going to be a solid budget option from the Dragon typing. And because Dragon typings are a little bit on the rare side, it could be very important to go ahead and get yourself a budget option, and I honestly think the Dragonite is going to be one of the best ones that you can use. Kingler. So Kingler, wow, what an amazing Pokemon, has an amazing story. It really has two kind of like facts to highlight. Number 1, an attack stat of 240, and then number 2, the addition of Crabhammer to this Pokemon propelled it at one time to the number 1 position as a water type attacker. That is insane. It actually dethroned Kyogre. Kyogre ended up getting its moveset updated to include Surf, which put it back to the number 1 position. But you still have Kingler in at the number 2 position as a non-legendary Pokemon. You can catch it in the wild up to level 35. I think it is a ballin' budget Pokemon, if you want to call it that. So Kingler, such a solid Pokemon to have from the water typing, and glad to include it on the list. Espeon. So Espeon's going to be an interesting situation. It has been a Pokemon that has been on people's radars for a very long period of time, including really all of the evolutions if you want to look at it, but we ended up seeing an update to the move Psychic. And the reason why this is so important is because Psychic became better than Future Sight. And at the same time, you have a Pokemon like Alakazam that did not have access to Psychic as far as its general moveset is concerned. Yes, it does have a legacy Psychic, but not that many people have a legacy Alakazam. So what I'm trying to say is Espeon got upgraded because Psychic got upgraded, while its competitor Alakazam did not get upgraded because it doesn't have Psychic as far as its regular moveset is concerned. So I think that makes Espeon a better budget Pokemon than something like an Alakazam, especially now with this moveset. Of course, you got a Pokemon like Mewtwo, but if you don't have a Mewtwo, I think Espeon could end up being a very solid option. Up next, we've got Honchkrow. So this is going to be very important to talk about Honchkrow and a couple of the Pokemon related next. So as far as the stats are concerned, that attack stat and that stamina stat are insanely good. It doesn't necessarily maintain a good overall ranking, but that's because its defense stat is absolutely terrible. But what it does possess is the ability of being a good flying type attacker with Peck, as well as Sky Attack. You are going to get beat by a legendary Pokemon like Moltres, for example, but of course, if you're looking for the budget option, I do think Honchkrow could be solid. It's also not that bad as a dark type attacker, but I wanted to go ahead and save the dark typing for another Pokemon, and that's going to be Weavile. So Weavile has an attack stat of 243. Its other stats are like somewhat mediocre in that way. It still maintains a pretty good overall ranking, but when you're talking about Weavile, you could use Weavile from the Ice type, from the Dark type. I honestly think you should designate it to the Dark typing with Snarl and Foul Play. It gets beat by a new Pokemon that was added into the game, like Darkrai, for example, but it still ends up being a solid option from the Dark typing. Of course, it's not a tank. You would use Tyranitar as a tank. At the same time, though, Tyranitar is unfortunately a little bit on the rare side, so I do think Weavile is going to be a solid option when you are talking about Dark type budget Pokemon. So we mentioned Ice, right? Weavile is a solid Ice type attacker, but I honestly think that we should focus on Mamoswine as an Ice type budget attacker. And as far as this Pokemon is concerned, an amazing attack stat, an amazing stamina stat. Sure, not that great of the defense, but as you can see, an overall ranking of 65th, that's pretty solid. And we want to use Mamoswine from the Ice typing with Powder Snow and then Avalanche. And yes, Mamoswine did get a Community Day, but the moveset that it got wasn't necessarily good by any means. So I actually opted to not evolve any of my Mamoswines during the Community Day windows. That way I could designate them all over to Ice, as well as, you know, Powder Snow and Avalanche in that case. Forget the ground typing. We've got another Pokemon on there from that ground typing to go ahead and talk about, but Mamoswine is something that you will not regret. So up next is Excadrill. So Excadrill, speaking of this ground type Pokemon, Excadrill is a new addition to this list with an attack stat of 255, a stamina stat of 242. That is insanely good. It does have an overall ranking of 89th in Pokemon Go. So as far as the ideal moveset that you want to go with, you want to have Mud Slap and Drill Run. Mud Slap was updated recently to become better, and then as far as its secondary move is concerned, it has Drill Run, it has Earthquake, but Drill Run is the better move that you want to end up going with. So in this case, Excadrill is considered to be like the top 3 ground type attackers in the game. Sometimes they end up moving around a little bit, such as like Rhyperior, and then maybe something like Garchomp, for example. But overall, I do think that Excadrill is one of the best budget Pokemon that you would want to have from that ground typing. A lot of expensive Pokemon to kind of talk about. But I mentioned Rhyperior briefly, and the reason why we are going to put this Pokemon on this list is because it got some major upgrades. Number 1, to the ground typing. It ends up technically making it a better ground type Pokemon, but I think you should use Excadrill as the designated ground type attacker, and then use Rhyperior as a rock type attacker, because there really aren't that many great rock type budget attackers. So let's go ahead and talk about the stats. The attack stat is amazing, the stamina stat is amazing, and the defense stat's actually really good too. So check this out, the overall ranking is 17th in Pokemon Go. That is insanely good for Rhyperior. So Rhyperior, as far as its competition is concerned, is going to be something like a Terrakion, which is a legendary Pokemon, and then maybe Rampardos. But a lot of people have complained to me that Rampardos would not necessarily be a budget Pokemon because it is so much rarer to end up finding in the game. So Rhyperior is going to serve as a solid budget option from the rock typing. The only other one I could maybe consider is maybe something like a Golem, for example, but Rhyperior is going to be dominant over Golem, so I would definitely go with Rhyperior if you can get your hands on it. Up next is Roserade. Roserade has easily been like the #1 budget Pokemon for the longest time. And although it is a dual type Pokemon of grass as well as poison, it's technically the #1 poison type attacker. It's also the #1 grass type attacker, so it really just depends on what you want to use it for. For me personally, I'm going to recommend going the grass route with Razor Leaf and then Grass Knot in that case. It has an amazing attack stat at 243, it has a solid defense stat, its stamina isn't necessarily that great, and its overall ranking isn't necessarily that great either. But one thing that Roserade has over its competitors is just not having a lot of competition necessarily from the grass side, from the poison side, and in that case you've got a Pokemon like Roserade that is able to take over the #1 spot from 2 different typings, which is insanely good. So that just about wraps up the video. I would love to know what you think about this episode and of course the budget Pokemon. Was there a budget Pokemon that I missed? Go ahead and let me know in the comments section below and I will see you next time. If you want to develop a deeper connection, I would highly recommend you to check out Patreon. We've got a lot of really cool things going on over there. Check out all of these supporters that we have. We are almost up to 100. We are also posting some special content, some behind the scenes work. And if that is the type of thing that interests you, I would highly recommend you to check it out.